care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. I want to thank all of you across the country listening to us or watching us, and in the 36 other countries around the world that are paying attention to what's happening on the Oshow. If you haven't already subscribed or followed on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or wherever you can find us, please do so you don't miss any of the incredible conversations. And one of them is coming up right now, I'm sure of it. I have as a guest today on the pod, Marit Stiles. She is the leader of the official opposition in the mighty Ontario, and she is fierce and fearless based on what she said today, or actually this past week. Will it get her in trouble? Will she get sued? Does she want that to happen? We're going to talk about all of it in Doug Ford's corruption, including how and if he can be beat in what looks like an election that's already starting in Ontario. Lots of stuff to talk to Marit about. Before we jump into that, just want to let you know what's coming up on the pod. We have the wonderful Dr. Vivian. She's going to be on the show. You all know her from television and her work on long-term care. She knows exactly what's going on in long-term care. It's alarming, and she's going to bring us up to speed on that next week. Plus, we're going to do a special on homelessness. We have as a guest Skid Row CEO. He is the man who walked across Canada with a shopping cart. He used to live in homelessness in Vancouver, and he is raising awareness about it. He is very, very compelling. We're also going to have on that special the CEO of Community Health Caring in Kitchener-Waterloo, one of the fastest growing communities in Canada. They are dealing with exponential issues around homelessness and precariously housed individuals and all kinds of other things. And they're on the front lines and doing some amazing stuff. So we've got some great pods coming up for you. But let's get right to our guest, Marit Stiles. Marit, welcome back to the Oshow.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me back.
Well, we had a wonderful conversation last time. Our viewers and our listeners may not realize this, but I never tell guests exactly what I'm going to ask them. You know, it's an open conversation. Yeah. It really is about communicating and getting to the bottom of what's going on out there. So ever since saying that you're coming back on the pod, as you can imagine, we have been inundated here at the Oshow with all kinds of questions for you, all kinds of election theories and everything else. But I want to start off the top with why I reached out to you last week. And that is you were on fire in the legislature, a legislature which now Doug Ford has taken almost a 5-month vacation from accountability. And you went right out afterwards, you out of your parliamentary privilege and protection, right out into the hallway in front of the media scrum. And you said that Doug Ford is corrupt. And this is my favorite part, and our producers, and if he doesn't like it, he can sue you because, as I understood it, Marit, we might actually find out about some of what's going on in this province through a legal discovery if you got sued. So why did you say it? What prompted you to be so fierce and fearless?
Well, you know, I mean, first of all, it's not the first time that I've actually said that in public. I think that when you look at the scandals and the sort of failures of the government over the last year, there's a pretty clear link between many of the decisions that the premier, particularly Doug Ford and his government have made, and a few people, particularly land speculators, who were going to benefit from those things. And I think that they've done it before and they'll do it again. And I think, you know, connected to that, and the reason I raised it outside of the legislature last week was, you know, he decided, as you said, to run scared, to take off on a 19-week vacation, give more of his MPPs a giant raise by appointing, I think, the largest cabinet, a $10 million cabinet in Ontario's history. And he thinks he can go underground and avoid public scrutiny. And we're not going to let him do that. And I absolutely think, you know, if he wants to come at me and sue me, bring it on. We will learn a lot of things that they've been trying to hide through the discovery process. And I think that's why I don't expect he will come after me for that. But look, what is clear and what has always been clear about this government is that again and again and again, they will stop at nothing to make their friends and insiders and corporations richer. And at the same time, people are really struggling out there. And it does get me. It makes me angry, actually, because I think people deserve a lot better than this.
Absolutely. And I think there's a ton of anger mounting about Ford out there, whether or not it's going to be enough to change the way the government is running in Ontario. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's just talk about corruption, because, of course, I've been saying it for months. The hashtag's been out there for a year or two. But after the Greenbelt scandal, when he said on camera, prior to the previous election, I've heard from you folks, I will not touch the Greenbelt. We won't touch the Greenbelt. And then went ahead and we found out about the giant scheme to try to touch the green belt, right? And to profit his developer pals. And we saw the exit of the minister's chief of staff. Now that minister, having served in the penalty box, as one of our scandal panelists said the other day, is now being rewarded with a government house job, right? It's sending a signal that you can engage in deception, which is part of the definition of corruption. You can engage in deception. But when you say it, Marit, it of course has a much, much bigger resonance than when I say it or anybody else online says it, because you're the head of the official opposition. And I noticed in that presser that you seemed a little bit peeved that the press corps was kind of saying, "Oh, whoa, wait a second, that's quite the thing to say." And you're like, "Hello, I have been saying this." So why do you think that now the mighty Queen's Park press corps is hearing you?
Well, that's a good question. I think part of it is that there are more and more scandals, and I think that the press gallery as well. I would say a lot of the journalists that have been following some of these scandals and this corruption are frustrated too, right? They've continued to try to uh, access information, things like um, transcripts and information based on the premiers and his staffs and key figures in the government's dealings with the Greenbelt. We know that the government has, they're supposed to not do government business on their personal devices. But if they do government business on personal devices, and that becomes subject to the freedom of information laws. And I think that journalists like us are really frustrated that the government is trying to constantly hide all of this from the public. And so I think when I said it this time, it connected, I guess. But look, I've always maintained that when it comes to the green belt, and I would say a lot of these other schemes, the rot starts at the top. The evidence shows pretty clearly that Mr. Ford knew more and much earlier about the scheme, as you mentioned, and that it was really always about a favor to speculators. And I'm really quite confident that the criminal RCMP investigation is going to bring a lot of this to light. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we're now having these conversations, all this speculation, and that the premier does seem to be looking at a very early election call.
Well, so much so that someone from Queen's Park, an MPP, is already starting to canvass, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. What I hear, though, when you say the RCMP investigation, I've talked to some people pretty high up there in police circles. They don't have a lot of confidence. People are also pointing to how long it took them to look at what's going on with Kenny in Alberta. Now we've got all this stuff happening, federally that they might be engaged with around possible interference from foreign governments. I mean, it doesn't feel like after 6 months since announcing the investigation, without a single update, Marit, that
Yeah.
we are going to find out anything before
Well,
this early election.
it is concerning, certainly. It's why we don't stop digging, and I know it's why the media, the journalists, haven't either, because we need to get to the bottom of this. As far as I know, I haven't had an update from the RCMP. I would like to believe that they're on it. But I think that the premier and his government know that we're not going to give up either, and nor are the media. We're going to keep turning up more information, and frankly, week after week, we've managed to do that. We've managed to find out more information, and we've pushed. You mentioned Steve Clark, but we pushed very hard in the opposition to for him to be held accountable for his role as, at the time, the Minister of Municipal and Housing, and he did eventually have to resign in disgrace.
Right.
And I think that the fact that that the premier has now appointed him to a very senior position, or as you said, he's out of the penalty box, it shows me that this premier doesn't take this seriously, that he still continues to think that he can do whatever he wants, that the public purse, that people's taxpayer dollars are his, to give away to his friends and insiders. And I gotta say, like, I think that is not the Ontario that Ontarians want. And I think at a time when people are really struggling, a lot of people have really done with this style of government.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that for our audience that's outside of Ontario, all the way to Russia and the Seychelles and wherever else people are
Yeah,
listening to
right.
the podcast. They might have heard about the green belt because it was so egregious. It was $8 billion giveaway to pals at a time before modern numbers. So it might be as much as 20 billion now. Point is, he said he wouldn't touch it. It's the lungs of the GTHA, which is one of the fastest. We had Gil Penalosa on the Urbanist last week, and he was telling us that the GTHA is one of the fast, if not the fastest growing area in the developed world, right? So we need that watershed. We need those trees. We're fighting for our family's future with the green belt. And so the idea that he would go in there cravenly and try to sneak out chunks of it to profit his pals is egregious. And I do think, as much as you and I see the Liberals are doing some stuff, and Mike at the Green Party's doing some stuff, as much as you're trying to use the levers within the legislature to get more information, AG reports, I see all that stuff. The RCMP does have a different weight if there's criminality here. And the Gmail scandal that came out just last week. I mean, Marit, I don't know about you, but I have a scandal panel just to track all Ford scandals because I can't keep up. They're
Yeah.
amazing. People should check out Keith and Mark. But I mean, the Gmail scandal, having stuff on a private server. I mean, we saw in McGuinty's government people go to jail
Yes,
for
that's
similar stuff.
That's right. A previous government, the Liberal government in Ontario under Dalton McGuinty, somebody went to jail over that stuff, and I see that as very similar. We've actually said that in the legislature a number of times. You cannot. If you think that you can hide stuff because it was on your personal device or personal Gmail, no, you don't get to do that. The laws are pretty clear in Ontario when it comes to the right of the people to be able to access that. And so that's why we've continued to push forward for the Freedom of Information and Privacy Commissioner to make a report on this, which she's done, and said, no, actually this is not okay. You can't continue to do business in Gmail and government business and then hide it. If you're doing business in Gmail, any personal device as well, that should be subject to freedom of information laws in Ontario. And so they clearly think they can get away with this. The premier, quite proudly talks about how he uses his personal device all the time. Well, sorry, but actually, the laws do apply to you, and you have to actually come clean with that. But look, it's not the only scandal. Like you said, there's Ontario Place, where the government has given basically away like $650 million, or some might say 800, to a private Austrian spa company to build a spa on the waterfront in the middle of parkland that nobody asked for. That smells bad. There's the decision to sort of unilaterally decide to put all these government service kiosks, Service Ontario, take them out of small businesses and out of communities and put them in Staples, which is a big American corporation. There's the deal they just gave to the beer store, where they're giving away at least $250 million to break a contract that was going to expire in a year anyways, just so they can get, beer into convenience stores, which certainly a lot of people want. But why did you have to break a contract and spend $250 million to do that? It's just one questionable decision or scandal or some, I would say corrupt deal after another.
Well, I mean, so the Ontario Place one, let's touch on that for a moment, because I think it's a great example. And we had the folks from Ontario Place for All on the pod. People can go back and listen to the episode. It was just a week ago or so. But they have the price tag is reaching almost $1 billion of taxpayers' money. There's the destruction of those mature trees. There's the decimation, as Gil Penalosa put it last week, to the waterfront, right? And they believe, as Gil believes, that the only way to make that financially viable is a casino, which has always been in the Ford radar. And it's also in a 95-year secret deal, Marit. Like, you don't need to put things in secret for 95 years. And why would you give a relatively young company from Austria 95 years locked in secret deal unless there's some other manifestation for that project? And then when they took a lawsuit to find out what's going on, the government put in legislation, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, we just heard yesterday, and it got thrown out of court. So, I mean, if that doesn't, like, me, that
this is a government that actually will change the laws so they can't be, to close all of the loopholes on their secret deals.
Right.
It's extraordinary. They've spent more time and money, frankly, fighting in the courts. And I think the example of Ontario Place is a really good one because they're even moving the Ontario Science Center out of its current location as another reason, like kind of building up the excuse for why they have to do this development. But you're right, a 95-year lease. And I can't imagine that anything is going to last 95 years, let alone some spa. So what is the real end goal here? Like, what is it they really want to do here? And I think people know that something doesn't sound right about this deal. They don't want the money and I mean, that's the other part of this. Like, I actually take that fiscal responsibility piece very seriously. Our job is to spend the taxpayer dollars very wisely and very responsibly. So the fact that they're throwing, as you said, when you really start to add it up, it almost comes out to $1 billion of taxpayer dollars on some scheme like that.
And
People have a right to understand what is really going on here.
And there's so many of those schemes in the big and the little. So the Greenbelt, huge. Ontario Place getting bigger by the day. We've got the 413 and all those lands along the
Yeah.
a highway nobody needs, like a spa nobody needs, right? Catering to developers. We've got the government paying 3 times more in some cases to private sector nursing agencies that are connected to the government tangentially. And for what? So that we're gutting our public health care. I mean, all of that. Add on the biggest cabinet in history with $10 million they just announced, the big salary boost. I think I saw it at Ford's chief of staff the other day. I mean, you add up the small and the large, and we're talking billions and billions and billions of
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
dollars,
And
right?
we have the deficit we've had in the history of this province. Like, it's not like these guys are, it's not like we're operating in great times, right? Like, when these guys are spending money that we don't have. And by the way, money that should be spent on things that would actually make lives better for people in Ontario, like hospitals, like nursing. Like, we have a healthcare crisis here in the province of Ontario, which I know you know about. And certainly rural communities in particular are seeing their emergency rooms closing at record rates. We have almost 2.5 million Ontarians who don't have access to a family doctor right now. We have a housing crisis that I think the government has to play a direct role in actually starting to build some of that affordable housing, or we're never going to get out of it. And something that's very near and dear to my heart are crumbling schools. I mean, schools in this province have never struggled, I think, as much as they are today. And so when I see things like, by the way, the Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, being now assigned to a different role as the Minister of Energy and Electrification, I think, wow, I mean, what a mess. Like, his legacy is to leave our schools in a far worse place. Our kids are struggling. Our education workers are struggling. Our schools are literally crumbling. And all of these things together, I often think, we're supposed to be competing with people, with countries around the world to attract, more people here who are going to do great jobs. We need people to work in certain sectors, and people are leaving Ontario. People are, they used to come here, and people used to want to stay here because we had great healthcare, great public schools. This is why I came to Ontario, actually, and for opportunities. And we are losing out, and we are sliding. I think now, and that's a terrible sign of where we're headed in terms of the economy, the opportunities, and the potential for prosperity. And Ontarians are really struggling. People are having a really rough time right now. So I think when you look at all of that waste, you look at the priorities of the government and the fact that they're making these sweetheart deals for their friends all the time, I can't believe that. I know the Ontarians that I speak to that they're really fed up with it, and I think the government knows that the longer that they stay in power and the longer they put off an election, they are actually worried about what's going to come out with regard to these scandals.
Well, it's like, to me, Marit, they're doing a fire sale. It feels like a fire sale. They're
Does feel
selling
like
off all the public assets, right?
that.
Their buddies are all profiting. Like, somebody, I hope, does a number watching this and tells us what the total tally is of all of the private deals, secret deals, scandals, wasted money.
Oh, right.
Where is it all, right? And maybe
There's
that's come out.
selling off of the healthcare system, which you mentioned. I mean, in terms of some of that we see in, I call it the hemorrhaging of healthcare dollars out of public hospitals and into private nursing agencies or private health clinics. I mean, those things actually cost more. And so our hospitals are worried that they can't make payroll for the healthcare staff they have, and they're being forced to go to this private for profit route. And I think again, like we always, as I mean, certainly as New Democrats, the public healthcare system is near and dear to our hearts because it was Tommy Douglas who brought about the healthcare system in Canada. I'm proud of it. And what this government has done is they have, and I think it started over the last couple of decades. We've seen this chipping away at our public healthcare system, this failure to keep up in the investment that's required to continue to provide excellent care. And I always say, it's the vultures we're circling. Those private companies, those for-profit providers in the U.S. who want to make a lot of money off of our healthcare system, and it's going to be Ontarians that literally pay the price, and they're already doing it. We're finding out more and more about people having to reach into their pockets to pay to get to the front of the line, to pay to access care that should really be free under the public system.
I know you're passionate about education. I'm passionate about people who are experiencing
Yeah.
homelessness. I think it is a huge warning beacon, or a huge warning, a light to a society that when the people who have the least are being treated as objectively terribly as they are in Ontario, I might be able to handle the secret deals and the stupid spas, Marit, and the unnecessary highways or whatever if I didn't see people in tents everywhere in my city and every city I go to.
Yes.
So how are they okay with going up to the cottage or taking 19 weeks off? We have hundreds of thousands of people in this country and tens of thousands in Ontario, and this premier is spending money on spas. It's
And
insane.
I think the other thing, honestly, I would say, Laura, and I agree with you that, it is a crisis in every corner of the province. And as the leader of the opposition, the NDP leader, I get to travel all over the province, and it is everywhere. It is in small towns. It is in even, rural communities where, maybe it was hidden before, but it's less hidden now. And certainly in bigger cities like in Hamilton and Toronto and in so many. And I think what's really concerning to me as well is not only are we not um, building the homes, and I mean the truly affordable and also supportive homes that we need for people who are currently without homes, but we are not preventing people from losing their homes. So people can't afford a home, true. Many can no longer afford rent, and there are real threats, ongoing threats of rent eviction. We have a government that will not bring back real rent control at a time when people are really teetering on the edge, and the supports that people need are non-existent or less so. I mean, it's terrible. I want to say the government kind of snuck through just last week in the middle of all the chaos, the fire of question period. Um, they sort of snuck through a definition of affordable housing that we've been waiting for. And I can tell you, it's never going to work. They're setting this whole thing up to fail. And so I want to say, because I look at what's happening in Ontario, and then I look at what's happening in, say, British Columbia, where we certainly have had a crisis there too. But they are building affordable housing on government land and offering grants and cheap financing for deeply affordable projects. And everywhere I go in Ontario, municipalities, agencies, nonprofit organizations are saying, my goodness, give us the tools, help us do this. We can get it, we can get going, but we cannot rely, and we will fail if we rely only on developers to make it happen, right? They just simply won't be willing to sell at a loss. They won't build the truly affordable and supportive units we need. Like,
Yeah,
we have to do that.
just now, just before we got on, I saw an article, I think it was shared by Keith Leslie from our Scandal panel, where the developers have said they can't afford to make money on that model that's put forward, that set up to fail. So, we can, I just want to do one more thing, and we'll move from issue identification, which is purely dystopic here, Merit, over to solutions here.
Yes.
But I mean, I get to spend every week that I can with people who are experiencing hunger and homelessness. 1,000 people kind of walk by my cookie table, and a lot of them are new. They're new to homelessness, and
Right.
some of them are seniors. And
Yes.
they'll tell me that they can now just afford rent, but not food. So they're there for the food, or that they have been rent evicted and they're now living in a tent or on the street trying to find a tent community. Like that's where we're
Right.
at in Ontario. It's real. And so when I get to meet these lovely guests every week and hear their true pain stories, as you do when you travel around the province in your role, it's impossible not to look at the waste of even $1 million could go a
Yeah.
long way for these people, let alone billions of dollars and hundreds of millions for an underground parking garage for a spa nobody asked for, nobody wants, and it's probably going to be a casino. I mean, we're living in a time where it's easy for people to disengage from politics. It's easy for people to give up. It seems as though the corruption runs so deep and so wide. The branches of the green belt, if you will, are endless.
Absolutely. And I always say, one of when you and I talked, I think last year about this, about, when I decided to run for the leadership of the NDP, that was the thing I was grappling with, was the low voter turnout in the last election. And I certainly don't blame any one person or anybody. I don't even I don't even blame the voters who didn't show up. I really don't. I think it's on us, and on me. It's one of the reasons I decided to run. Is I think we have to be able to sort of connect with people and convince people again that you don't need to settle for this, that actually government has a role to play in fixing the problems that you have. And the fact that we have governments that keep saying, no, no, the market forces are going to fix it, or there's this magic formula. They have the power and they're choosing not to use it. And I think we need to give some people some hope again. And that's why even though we've talked a lot about the problems so far in this conversation, but I do think that it's really important that we're always putting forward solutions that are realistic, that would actually have a tangible impact on people's lives. I always give the example of, you mentioned the 413 earlier, but there's actually something that the government could be doing right now to relieve some of the congestion on the 401 for people and get people home earlier. And that's open up the 407 free to truckers. And this is not just my idea. I mean, this is being proposed by others, but I pushed really hard on this. We brought forward a motion on this. We said, look, we dare you guys, vote down that idea. Let's go, let's do it. And they don't,
Right.
because that's what it's really about. They could do little things like that right now, and it would actually make life better for people. They're choosing not to. It's a choice. But we have to remind people, and I'm going to say too, if he calls an early election mode, I would say, you know what? If he thinks that he's going to do that and that people aren't going to be paying attention and they'll just automatically get another 4 years, I would say bring it. That's what I've been saying. Just bring it.
Okay,
Because
well,
we're getting ready.
I love that feisty attitude, but let me challenge you here, Merit. They are very good. I did a rant about this on the Scandal panel show. They're very good at messaging, right? There's a discipline there. Federally acts the tax, jail not bail, right? Ford trucks, shoot along on the gravy train language that he was using. I think it's a gravy train wreck now, but the gravy train was a powerful image in people's minds. What are the three priorities, the three things the NDP are going to do to give hope to Ontario? And how are you going to position it in a way that sticks? Because there's a stickiness factor to go to Gladwell on repetition and on being succinct. And I don't see a very clear proposition coming from the NDP. And if I get Bonnie on, I'll ask her for the Liberals and Mike for the Greens. But what is it for the NDP? What are the three things that Ontario's needs to hear now and hear until that day where we get to go cast our ballot?
Right. So, obviously, we're going to roll out our platform and our plan. But I will say, I think we are further along in our election preparedness than we've been in many, many cycles. We're ready to go, and we are not the same. I think if you look at the issues that we've been focused on, we've been pretty darn clear and focused.
Mhm.
Healthcare, future of healthcare, housing is absolutely the other big priority, and affordability. But I think the other work that we have to do, honestly, is to show people that government does not have to be corrupt or catering to elite interests, that the government can make your life easier and it can make your life more affordable. And you're going to see us rolling out clear, succinct messages that connect, I think, with a lot of people. The last year and a half or so since I became leader, I've been on the road doing a lot of listening, a lot of connecting, and a lot of listening to where people are at. I choose those things that I'm talking about because that is where people are focused on. It is, as you said, the real crisis in housing, which impacts just about everybody. The situation of our healthcare system, which people have often talk about healthcare being their number one issue, right? But they don't always vote on that issue. But I think today, the fact that you could show up at an emergency room in your community in rural Ontario and the emergency room is closed and you have a sick kid and it's going to take you hours to get somewhere else, it's real. It's real. So we'll have a few things like that, and we'll have some very specific offers that will, I think, really connect with people. But look, I really believe that this election is coming. I believe it's going to come early, and I also want to say to you, I've seen other governments do this before, where they had the arrogance to think they could call an election, 2 years ahead of time, and then surf on. And I think the people of Ontario are a whole lot smarter than that, and
So
they're
let's
not.
yeah.
They're not going to stand for it.
So let me take you at your word that you're going to come up with. Unfortunately, bumper stickers is the way that it's working now in communication. It's 2024, so you need to have something that's repetitive and easy and redundant and catchy. And I can't even go for a manicure, as I said on the Scandal panel, without hearing his ads on Spotify, etc. Right? So I mean, they're all over it. They're flooding the zone. They're way ahead. So I'll take it on your word. You've got your priorities. You'll come out with a good campaign. You're gonna hit it. You're gonna hit it hard. But is the goal to beat Ford or to stay official opposition status? Because if
Oh,
it's Pete Ford, are you going to train your guns on him, or are you going to waste time going after Bonnie and the Liberals or Mike and the Greens?
I mean, if you look at what I've been doing and what we've been focused at over the last, we are 100% laser focused on defeating this government and replacing them with an NDP government. 100%. And, I think, that's what we're in for, right? Like I'm competitive. I believe we can do it. I am ready for this. We have been, as a party, I think we are, as I said, further along in our election preparedness, raising more money than we've raised in the past. And we have our committees and our candidate search and everything up and running big time. So my focus is not on the Liberals. My focus is on actually showing Ontarians what an NDP government can do for them.
And
And
do you focus on the seats you can take from Ford as opposed to one that might be, you can take from a Liberal? Not that there's many,
well,
but
I mean, I was going to say, but truthfully, there aren't many, right? So our focus is very much on seats where, obviously, holding on the seats we have, and we have a very strong. I mean, this is, I think, one of our great advantages is we have an extremely strong team of experienced MPPs who are ready to step into ministerial roles. They know their files, and they have represented their communities exceedingly well.
well,
So we have
I applaud you for being here and doing the Oshow. And I hope that you do a lot more of my pod or other great pods that are out there and other shows. I mean, we have to get to where the people are having the conversations, right?
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
but on that, you have a former member of your caucus, Sarah Jama, who just put out this morning that she is starting to canvass and caucus because of the rumors of an early election. And the Osho is based out of Hamilton. We have a large Hamilton contingency who are also NDPers.
Yeah.
So what's the status with what's happening with Sarah? Could she ever be back part of the team? I mean, is that because you might give up a seat there, right, in Hamilton Center?
Well, I mean, at this point, I mean, I would assume any MPP is out canvassing and knocking on doors, as they should be. And certainly, we're working with MPP JAMA on an issue by issue basis when there's issues that we think that are going to be, obviously our priorities for the people of Hamilton Center. We're not talking about changing the status of all of this right now. Um, but, as I said, like one of our aims for sure is going to be regaining seats
Mhm.
across the province, which we've lost or we don't have currently sitting MPPs. That will be one of our focuses. And then the next bunch of seats that we'll be focused on are the seats where we've come a close second. I always say, 'cause reporters will often push me on this, and I said, well, go look at it yourself. You can figure out it's clear. There are many, many seats where we came a close second last time, and we're not going to make that mistake this time. We're going to dig in. We're going to have excellent candidates, which we're already identifying. And we're going to be ready to show Ontarians what an NDP government can do for them. And that is a really important part of this because, as you said, we've spent a lot of time over the last few years holding the government to account. And this is a government that's frankly dirty, right? We've had scandal after scandal. They've spent more time in reverse than they have moving forward. I want to show people that a government doesn't have to be like that. Catering to those elite interests. We can make your life easier and more affordable, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, it's a good pitch. And you've certainly, as I've said many times, you've been punching above your weight based on what I've seen the NDP do previous years under previous leaders. You've really made more of a name for yourself. And I'm hearing from you, and I'm hoping I'm going to continue to see this, that we're never going to have to watch a provincial debate, whether or not Ford bothers to show up next time or not, where we watch the opposition parties turn their guns on each other and leave him standing there. I'll lose my mind, Marit.
No, I hear you. I understand the frustration in that. I will say though, I do want to say, I do not think we as New Democrats are the same as the Liberals under Bonnie Crombie. I think we are very different parties. I think we have a very different, I actually think that Doug Ford and the Crombie Liberals draw on a lot of the same pool of donors, etc. And I can be critical of them too. I do think that the Liberals have to stand also on their record previously. But you're right. That my focus is on defeating the government, right? That is absolutely 100% my focus. And that's why I often say as well, like, I don't think that the Liberals are competing for the same thing we are. I think they are, and I can't speak for them, but they have to regain party status. They have a long road ahead. It's for me, the battle is between us and the Conservatives, absolutely 100%. And we will continue to do that, and we will be very focused on that.
Okay, I love all of that. And Bonnie's welcome to come on the show and make her case 100%. I'll see what she stands for and what they're fighting for. I have to ask you though, and just maybe as a last question, what about Bob Rae days? When I moved to Ontario was the day he won the election, and people were shell shocked. And then we had all that Bob Rae stuff. And isn't there a cohort of Ontarians who hear NDP as government and still feel a little bit of that? How do you get over that old narrative?
Yeah, definitely. I hear that occasionally. I have to say, I think that's it surprises me sometimes, but the truth is that there are a lot more Ontarians today who are voting who don't even know about that time. And I'm also, there's things that I'm proud of that the NDP achieved that I think, and I've said this to you, I think before, that I speak very proudly of many of the accomplishments we had in that era at a very different, very, very difficult time economically around the world. But we brought in the Environmental Bill of Rights. Nurse practitioners practice and midwives practice in Ontario because of the NDP government. We built more truly affordable housing than I think any government had before. And then the Liberals and the Conservatives ended that, both federally and provincially. So I have no problem standing up by that record. And I honestly believe that here today, 35 years later almost, that, we have the experience and the ability to do that. And I also point to other NDP governments across the country. The NDP has formed some extremely successful and very fiscally responsible governments, particularly in the West, and done really great things. And I like to look at my friends in BC and my friend Wab Canoe in Manitoba, and I'm so proud of the work they are doing. And it makes me really frustrated that we're not getting those same things done here in Ontario, because this government is failing people. So I'm excited about showing people what an NDP government can do. And I think, as you may recall, the last time that a government called a very early election, I was arrogant enough to go to the polls this early back in 1990. Uh, they got a pretty rude awakening. The people of Ontario said, you know what? We don't like you. Feeling like you can just take our votes for granted and spend all this money on an election that we don't need. And they elected a New Democrats. I'm ready to do that again. And I think we have the experience and the ideas and I'm excited about getting to the polls actually.
Well, that was a masterclass answer on the whole Ray Days thing. I got to tell you, I'm going to send the link to Bob Ray, who, of course, people would know is now a distinguished diplomat for Canada, ambassador to New York, I believe. And that was a great answer. You're talking about a new generation of Ontarians. You're talking about a new future, and I just like hearing you. You know, I'm nonpartisan. I am biased against corruption and the Ford government, obviously, because you have to be. I mean, come on, you can't have people languishing in hallways, seniors, and people not being able to get long-term care, and people living in homelessness all over your community and not look at the government that's not providing housing or healthcare, right? So, I mean, but I'm nonpartisan, but I love to hear you talking about what the government can do for people. And I think people, as much as they might not like Ford, they have to have something to vote for, right? They come to the polls not to cast a ballot against, but to cast a ballot for something. So I'm hearing a new value proposition from you for Ontario, and I can't wait to hear what our Oshow listeners and our viewers across Canada and Ontario and Hamilton. I'm sure I'll hear lots of Hamilton comments. What they think about what you're putting forward, Marit, and your approach to this, because dreaded strategic voting is all I'm hearing about now. What do we do? Who do we vote for on the center left to stop Ford? I'm sure you'll be dealing with that as you go forward. I look forward to a tight campaign and messaging, please.
And can I tell you, I mean, Laura, as well, like I one of the other things the message I want to send to Ontarians is, I am interested in building and also leading a movement that's going to bring about real change, right? And defeat the government. And I don't care what you voted in the past. I'm bringing people together and I'm building a movement of people who want life to be more affordable, of people who want to maybe own a home or be able to affordably rent a home, who want to have a family doctor. These are pretty basic things. Want their kids to go to a decent school. I do believe that government can do good things and they can actually get out of your way when they need to. And I think that there's a lot of people, there's a very wide swath of Ontario that agrees with that. And so I really do think that we can bring those people together as a movement to defeat this government.
Well, I'm glad that you're talking to Sarah Jama. I think all hands on deck if we're going to defeat Ford. And we do it not because he carries a particular label, conservative or whatever, at least in my mind. I do it because the people of Ontario need better, and my tax dollars have to go to the people who need programs that need it. It cannot go to rich people. I can't take it anymore. Thank you so much, Marit. I booked you for half an hour. You've given me much more than that.
Well, thanks so much.
Well, I said off the top of the show, you're fierce and fearless, and I think that's going to be critical in this early election that's now been called, for somebody to be out there and to remind Ontarians about the options, and also the specter of a Poilievre conservative government federally doesn't play well for conservatives provincially, which is why I think Ford might be trying to get ahead of that whole thing. But all that being said, thank you for doing the Oshow. I hope you'll come back. And
of course.
I look forward to seeing you both hold Ford to account, use the levers you have in the legislature, and also whatever your campaign is going to look like, I'll be watching and commenting on it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord. Really appreciate it. All you do.
Thank you. And for everyone watching, subscribe, follow, whatever it takes for you to be in this conversation, because we're all going to have to stay engaged and informed. Thank you for watching and listening to The Oshow.
When you care about current affairs, it's on The Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on The Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into The Oshow. It's The Oshow. Laura Babcock's The Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on The Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on The Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on The Oshow. It's a podcast, The Oshow. Laura Babcock's The Oshow. Stay informed with The Oshow, Oshow.
your merch bin.